Season of Discovery ends Phase 4 with Karazhan Crypts, but what about what comes before that? And then there is the fun question of what comes after. Well, we all know that Season of Discovery has 4 phases, and that Phase 1 is Black Fathom Deeps at level 25, as well as the Ashen Veil PvP zone for its PvP event. It's our introduction to level up raids and new PvP event zones, letting Blizzard test the waters, dipping their toes in to see just what the classic player base enjoys and just what it hates. And I think they've hit the nail on the head on how to properly release content and make changes to Season of Discovery because of the phase system. 4 to 12 weeks between each phase is a sweet spot for letting people enjoy content without getting bored. This system lets everyone share how they feel about a new experience, because every person you ask will have a wildly different answer to what is Classic Plus. So this is far more useful to Blizzard than 1,000 voices yelling different things. So Black Fathom Deeps and the Ashen Veil PvP event zone are testing grounds for player reactions. When you keep that information in mind, it makes the remaining phases and schedule make a lot more sense. Phase 2 is Gnomeragon at level 40, and it's a dungeon that's massive, full of flavor, and still abandoned in retail, leaving the gnomes as homeless refugees for almost 2 decades. Just like Black Fathom Deeps, it's a large dungeon that can essentially be broken into different wings and be filled with bosses, events, and quests that just feel natural. And just how Phase 1 had a massive PvP event zone, Phase 2 will have one as well. Well, it should, so long as the player base doesn't lose their collective minds and tear Ashen Veil down so hard that Blizzard cancels their plans. Warlords of Draenor. And whilst BFD is in Ashen Veil, so is Warsong Gulch. So you'd think that Phase 2's PvP zone event should be in the Arathi Highlands to tie it into Arathi Basin. But you'd be wrong, because Phase 2's PvP event zone is in Stranglethorn Vale. Honestly, it would be funny if they kept PvP zone events in the zone of the dungeon, but how could they turn an alliance leveling zone into a PvP event zone? Are all dwarves and gnomes just being exiled to Elwyn Forest? No, that won't happen. But Stranglethorn Vale itself makes perfect sense, a highly contested PvP zone and one that should have had a battleground from the get-go. We can likely expect a new reputation, a new quartermaster for some PvP loot down there, but we'll find out more in the coming weeks. Now, Phase 3 is where it gets spicy, but also still makes perfect sense since we have Scarlet Monastery, which comes with the level cap of 50, but it's also just north of a very conflicted and iconic battleground. That's right, Alterac Mountains and thus Alterac Valley, with Scarlet Monastery being one of the most iconic dungeons because of Sally White, I mean because of badass crusaders, and Alterac Valley being one of the most recognizable battlegrounds in World of Warcraft. It's a perfect combination to throw out for Phase 3. Regardless, between the level cap of 50 and Scarlet Monastery being turned into a massive level up raid with new bosses, remastered bosses, new events, quests, and perhaps even a brand new reputation, Phase 3 is looking to be incredibly exciting. The PvP is just icing on that beautiful, delicious cake. And then that brings us to Phase 4 and the first new dungeon in Classic, Karazhan Crypts, a dungeon that was designed back in 2002 or 2003 and then abandoned because they ran out of time, before becoming the raid known as Karazhan and the Burning Crusade. We know nothing about Karazhan Crypts, and people will be making pure conjecture until it comes out, but I expect us to perhaps see original quest lines and ideas make it back into the game. It could be the start of an alternate timeline with ideas from vanilla making a frontline return. We will likely get a new reputation to grind, new quests, new items, and perhaps even instead of being a 10-man level up raid, we're looking at the first new 20-man or 40-man raid in Classic. But PvE without PvP just isn't World of Warcraft, and thus the new PvP zone event for Phase 4 is also likely to be new content. Since Karazhan Crypts an abandoned and forgotten concept and ideas being brought back to life, so will, in my opinion, Azshara Crater, a completely new battleground dreamed back to life for Classic, as well as turning Azshara into a massive level 60 zone-wide PvP event zone. New reputations, quest lines, and much more are going to be given to us, and our dream is the limit, or in this case the amount of risk Blizzard is willing to take. And thus I conclude what I call the Season of Discovery introduction phases, which are amazing and incredible. Whilst we don't know exactly what we'll be getting, it's only the beginning of Season of Discovery because Blizzard has already said we're getting more content at level 60. And thus, let me introduce you all to the Season of Discovery endgame phases, which is Phase 5 to 8. Now, you might think that 8 phases is a lot, but Classic, when it came out in 2019, had 6 phases, and that was just re-releasing the original 6 raids. Now, this is what we call the educated guessing phase, where we have ideas and we know what they're going to do nominally, but despite knowing we're getting content, new and old, changes and more, we don't know what that is. So this is more of a wish list for content. So Phase 5 is of course none other than Molten Core and the top 5 most iconic raids in World of Warcraft after Black Temple, Ulduar, ICC, and Siege of Orgrimmar. Don't crucify me for that top 5 in the comments. Whilst Molten Core might not be the most iconic raid, Thunder Fury, Blessed Blade of the Windseeker is the single most iconic in-game weapon from World of Warcraft, if you don't count Frostmourne or the Warglaive. waves. We're looking at a remastered Molten core, new bosses, mobs, quests, items, and perhaps even legendaries and reputations. A legendary that's already in the game but only one singular person got is the necklace back from vanilla, which got removed because it wasn't meant to be in the game. Now that necklace might not come back, but they already have legendaries they designed back then, which they could reincorporate into Season of Discovery. I'm not sure exactly how much they'll change Molten core and with it Onyxia, but there will be changes. As for PvP, Blackrock Mountain is the single most cancerous PvP zone in the game. If you played on a PvP server, then you'll be having Vietnam flashbacks. So we know that Molten core and Onyxia are coming, but what about new content? Allow me to introduce the new and improved Dire Maul or Blackrock Depths. These two dungeons are massive, so massive in fact that in Cataclysm they got cut down and reshaped into multiple separate wings, and in BRD's case they just scrapped well over half of it. Either of these two dungeons make most sense as being a new 20-man raid or 10-man raid, and logically it makes sense because Blizzard stated that they wanted new players to be able to catch up easily phase to phase, so introducing more level 60 level up raids makes gearing a lot easier and allows transitioning into raids more easily, albeit I'm not sure if they'll focus all the effort into making the already existing raids better and more fun to interact with and keeping the phases between 4 and 12 weeks long so we get a lot of hyper-focused content and then new phases before we get bored. Or maybe phases 5 to 8 will be 6 months long each with a storm of content to keep us all content. Nonetheless, phase 6 is Blackwing, Lair and Zul'gurub, two fun and interesting raids which will definitely get more quests, perhaps reputations, new mechanics, changes and loot. The dungeons most likely to get changed with this phase are Temple of Atal Hakar for ZG and Blackrock Spire for Blackwing Lair, correlating nicely with each other. Also, Blackrock Mountain being a horrible war zone probably continues into phase 6, maybe Stranglethorn Vale as well at this point. But then again, perhaps this is an overload of content and I'm overestimating Blizzard's zeal, desire and goals when it comes to classic Season of Discovery. There is a lot that they could do here, so much in fact that this could easily be a 6-month content stretch between the 10-mans, 20-mans and 40-mans. Let's move on though to phase 7, which is where I think we're going to see the most new content in the game. Scarab Lord is a very coveted title and the Ahn'Qiraj battle tank is one of the rarest mounts in the entire game. The opening of Ahn'Qiraj and the Scepter of the Shifting Sand questline is long, awesome and genuinely a wild experience.
That's what she said. Or he said.
So imagine the things they could do here, the things they could add. Imagine a massive zone-wide PvP event in Silithus where the Horde and Alliance battle it out for new PvP reputations and items. AQ40 and AQ20 are incredible raids full of awesome bosses, lore, mechanics, and loot, and I can't wait to see what Blizzard does here. But we aren't theory crafting if we don't think about new content, and with that, allow me to introduce Uldaman, the new 10-man dungeon and another location to gear with level 60 gear so you can delve into the raids faster. Last but not least, Phase 8 and the dreaded Naxxramas, the so-called Guild Killer in Vanilla and definitely Guild Killer in Classic as everything devolved into GDKPs and triggered hyperinflation. Naxxramas will likely get more loot, new quests, new bosses, new mechanics and more. That's to be expected. But what else will change in Phase 8? Well, let me introduce you all to the new 20-man or 10-man raid Stratholme, one of the most iconic places in all of Warcraft and the beginning of the fall for our beloved Prince Arthas. Now, this is me wishing, but it could make sense as once Eastern Plague lands into a massive PvP zone event, which is already supported by the towers situated across the zone, it would make a lot of sense to have more than just Naxxramas for the entirety of Phase 8, and the size of Stratholme already correlates to being a miniature raid anyways. Even if they only include a fraction of what I've spoken of, and even if they go absolutely a completely different path, the amount of content that Blizzard seems to be planning to add to Classic Plus Season of Discovery is staggering. And whilst all of this might not be in Season of Discovery, it will definitely be in Classic Plus. So whether Season of Discovery is Classic Plus or leads into Classic Plus, expect an obscene amount of content just from the endgame phases. Now, this last section is going to be the shortest, but allow me to show you my terrible but somewhat decent guess to the final stretch. Welcome to Season of Discovery, Classic Plus phases. This section right here isn't going to have me guess as to how, why, or even what any of this will look like. This is just my guess of the content that's coming once they finish with existing content. No matter how reasonable a guess, everything is in the air based on player feedback and reactions through all the phases. If you want to see more from me, watch this video right here, and subscribe and like the video if you're depressed. If you're not depressed, like and subscribe anyways. Thank you, Ebonhard out.